Hello friends, my name is Marina and this is Rapunzel Fiber Arts. It is 2024, a whole new year, and guess what? I'm still crafting. This is what we're going to be working with today. It is some Coopworth, which still has a couple pieces of VM in it, which I'm apt to pull out, but we carded up about 6 ounces of bats here. I make my bats very light and airy. As you can see, this bin is stuffed full of fluff, but it is actually only 6 ounces, so this will spin up and just fill one of my big 8-ounce bobbins. Probably not exceed the capacity of one, and then we'll get it plied so that I can make some mitts. We carded this up together about 3 or 4 months ago now. It's been a bit, but I'll link the video so that you can check it out if you either didn't see it or would like to refresh your memory on this fiber. This is a very lovely fleece. I was gifted just a small portion of by a friend who didn't need all of it. And I'm really excited to be working with it. I've spun this fiber before. I made a pair of fingerless mitts for myself out of it, which I really loved and then managed to lose at some point last winter. So it's time to go ahead and make a new pair of mitts out of this fluff. But the first step that we have to do is go ahead and get it spun. So I guess we'll go ahead and get that process started. I'm going to take this bin upstairs to where my spinning wheel lives. I'll bring you with me and we will get some footage of me spinning up this lovely fluff. It's going to be really nice to spin because it is so light and airy. I think I did about 1 ounce per bat because again, this is 6 ounces and I've got 5 or 6 bats in here. And that's how I typically process fiber. I like it to be really light and airy. I think that makes the process of spinning much more pleasant, much smoother. You have to do less pre-drafting because it's already so light, fluffy, and ready to be spun. So, like I said, we're gonna go ahead, go upstairs, and start spinning.
All right, friends, so here I go taking that bat, and what I do is I just like to divide it in half and then take that half and divide it once again, just splitting my bat into quarters, and that essentially turns it into short strips of roving, which makes it a little bit more manageable and a little bit more easy to spin. And then I'm just opening up my leader thread, which is a loop, passing some of the fiber through it, and then starting to add some twist to that fiber. So as you can see in this better angle, I spin using both of my hands. The hand in back is kind of just holding that fiber supply, not letting it get too unwieldy. You can see I occasionally smooth back the fiber just to make sure it isn't bunching up in a way that makes it harder to spin when I get to it. And then that front hand is really controlling the twist as it enters the fiber supply. So making sure that I have elongated out those fibers and made them a little bit more stretched out, thinner, so that the yarn that I'm making is a little finer. I tend to spin fairly fine yarns. I think this works up into a DK or worsted weight, which I guess isn't that fine, but regardless, you can kind of see how I'm controlling that twist and not letting it into the fiber until the fiber is spread out and elongated and a little bit thinner before the twist gets incorporated. You can also probably tell that these singles are a little bit fuzzy, and that's just due to the carded prep. That's kind of a woolen prep as opposed to a worsted prep. So even though I'm spinning this in a pretty worsted style, it is still fairly fluffy, it is still airy, and it is fuzzy. So that's kind of what a semi-woolen yarn would look like, where it's fluffy and bouncy and full of air, but I'm still smoothing it back and using that worsted style of spinning to make a semi-woolen or a semi-worsted yarn, depending on which way it's leaning. I would say this leans into a woolen category. So here I have spun everything up pretty considerably. This is a 16 multiplication speed. So I just kind of wanted to show you how I fill up my bobbins. Pretty much what I do is I start at the very back of the bobbin, the furthest away from where I'm sitting, add yarn onto the bobbin until there is a small bump. I don't let it really build up very much. I usually just let it incrementally increase before I move the thread guide that lives on the flyer arm, before I move that towards me just a tiny bit. And those incremental changes slowly fill the bobbin, make it wind up very consistently and smoothly, and result in a very nice nicely filled bobbin. Additionally, when I get to the very front, I just go straight to the back again, and that creates a line where you can see where on the bobbin you are, so that if your yarn breaks, you can find it again very easily.
All right, friends. So I went ahead and finished spinning up this ball of that Coopworth that I showed you the bats and then the spinning process of. And now it is time to go ahead and get to plying. Like I said, I wound this up on my ball winder, which makes a center pull ball, so you can pull from the inside and the outside, which makes making a 2-ply yarn very convenient, very easy, and a mostly smooth process. Sometimes you can have some tangles, which are not the funnest, just because there's a lot of twirling going on in here, and sometimes when you pull out it can snag, especially when you have kind of fuzzy singles like these. So I'm going to be pretty careful. I also let my singles set for about 2 days. That's something that I typically do, especially when I'm not in a rush to get something finished. It gives your yarn a chance to sit and the twist to kind of relax a little bit. It's still there. It's not like this is gonna fall apart if I start pulling on it, but the twist is not quite so springy, not quite so apt to tangle and create a mess. So hopefully this goes pretty smoothly. We're gonna go ahead back upstairs to my e-spinner and get to plying, but I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of what I did to go from my singles on the bobbin to this, what I do, how I do it, so that you don't encounter unpleasant tangles when you are doing center pull ball plying. So yeah, let's go back upstairs.
All right, friends. So in addition to resting your singles for a day or two, you can also do a couple other things to reduce tangling when you're doing center pull ball plying. So something that I did for a very long time was I would actually take a toilet paper or paper towel roll, cut it down to the size of my ball winder, and put it on the ball winder where you wind on yarn, and that would keep the singles under tension until I was ready to ply them. So they essentially were rested for as long as they were on that toilet paper roll, which was really, really helpful to reduce tangling. Something that I do now, because I no longer have a ball winder that accommodates a toilet paper roll, is I just take the cake of singles and slide that directly from the ball winder onto a dowel or similarly sized item. And that just helps keep those singles not too tangly. Something else I wanted to mention is that these singles are going to be a little bit more likely to tangle because they are fuzzy. And that's just because they're the individual fibers that are coming off of the yarn are likely to tangle with each other and then cause an overall yarn tangle because those little individual threads of wool are tangled up with each other. So generally, how I ply is how I'm doing it here, where I have my singles behind me or just next to me, and I'm using both hands, just like with spinning, and I'm using that front hand to control the twist, again, just like with spinning. So that backhand is just controlling the singles, making sure that they are evenly tensioned, making sure that they aren't going anywhere, and that the individual strands are coming towards the wheel evenly, so that you don't have one ply way more bunched up on the other, as opposed to a nice even ply bump texture. Hopefully that made good sense. Something else that I wanted to talk about was when you spin, you generally spin clockwise, whether you're on a spindle, a wheel, an e-spinner. The general norm is to spin clockwise and ply counterclockwise, and that's what I'm doing here. There is an exception to this, which is opposing ply yarns. I have only made opposing ply yarns once. An opposing ply yarn is when you have your singles spun. I think I did a 3-ply, so it was 2 singles spun clockwise and 1 single plied spun counterclockwise, and then all 3 plied counterclockwise. And that 1 ply that was spun and plied counterclockwise is the opposing ply. So that's what makes an opposing ply yarn. Hopefully that made sense. However, my experience working with an opposing ply yarn was very unpleasant. I made a pair of socks for a friend of mine who I think appreciated them, but I didn't really enjoy knitting them because all of that active twist in that opposing ply made the yarn super springy, super liable to do pigtails, which is when it tangles up on itself and makes like a little tail that sticks out. And just generally speaking, the opposing ply yarn was not really a very fun experience for me. So take that with a grain of salt. Feel free to experiment to your heart's content, but that is my experience with opposing ply yarns. I did it one time many years ago, and I have not looked back. I much prefer plying traditionally with just going the opposite direction to the spin twist. So hopefully that was an interesting tangent and not distracting from what's going on. And when we wrap up spinning this, we will go ahead and get right to discussing the finished yarn.
All right, friends, we are back. I have some finished yarn to show you. It all fit on one bobbin and into one ball when I was spinning it. But then when I went to ply, I had this little guy left over. I unfortunately failed at bobbin chicken, trying to get all of the yarn onto one bobbin when you ply it. And so I have this little teeny tiny mini skein left over, but that's okay. Maybe I'll use it for a swatch or something like that. Or maybe I'll just use it at the end of the project or the beginning of the project to use it up. Regardless, I have these one giant skein and one teeny tiny skein of this Coopworth that I spun and plied. It's really gorgeous. It's a little crunchy. It's got that I think it's Romney Lincoln blend is what I said in a previous video. I'll double check that and put it up on the screen if I got it wrong. But both of those are pretty crunchy breeds. They've got a little bit more coarseness to them. They're not as fine as like a Merino or a Targhee or even a BFL. They've got a little more crunch to them, which I don't mind. I think it's fun. It's a really interesting texture. It's not necessarily something that you want like on your neck or really close to you, but honestly, this doesn't feel that bad on my neck. It's got some texture to it for sure, but not necessarily negative. But I'm not super sensitive when it comes to wool, so maybe that's just my preference. But I'm happy cuddling this finished skein. I think it's gorgeous. I think this is about 6 ounces total, so I was a little surprised that it didn't all ply up onto that bobbin, but because I carded these into bats, I think it's really airy, and especially when I plied and let some of that twist out of the singles, as you do with plied yarn, you spin or you ply in the opposite direction that you spin, and that reduces the twist, and that makes it floof a little bit more. So I think that's why it didn't all fit on one bobbin when I went ahead and plied what was fitting on one bobbin as a singles. So I still have to go ahead and wash these as well as some other yarns in this bin here. I accumulate and then do everything as a big batch. So that is my plan. I'm gonna go ahead and get this all washed up, and then I think we're going to turn it into a pair of mitts. There will definitely be yarn left over. The mitts only take 2 or 3 ounces, and like I said, this is about 6. So maybe I'll have enough for a second pair, or for like a matching, maybe not quite enough for a matching hat, but maybe like a headband or something. That could be cute. Or maybe I'll just save it and make a second pair of mitts when the first pair wears out, because I do really like this, and this is all that's left because this is all I was gifted. I was gifted a bat a while ago, which I spun and knit into the first pair of mitts, and then I had this, which was gifted to me as washed and picked locks, which I then carded, spun, plied, and this is what the result is. So hopefully that made sense. It was gifted to me in 2 different packages, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm super excited about this project that we did today. I hope, well, over the last couple of days, because it wasn't all one day for me, even though it's all one video for you. But I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope maybe you learned a little something along the way, and I hope that you enjoyed watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe to my channel. I put out content like this whenever I can, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Obviously, I'm very happy. I'm really enjoying cuddling this skein, but that's all for today. I will see all of you in the next video, and I hope that you have a fantastic day. Bye, friends.